Okay, so I figured I would do a video on fighting with knives or knife fighting or whatever. These are some knives that are made to stab people. At least pretty much every one of these is. Almost forgot about this one. I did a video on that thing earlier, and someone made a comment about knife fighting or whatever, and it got me to thinking about this. I made pretty much all of these except for this one. Yeah. So this was the first knife I ever made. This is a piece of a school desk. So this is like my prison shank. This is the third knife I ever made. The one that's in between these two is in a rest bucket in the garage. It was a smaller file and I fucked up doing it. I cut it off with a saw and I didn't have any way to heat treat, so it just doesn't take an edge at all. And then it got rusted in the same flood that this one did, and this one did, and this one did. There were quite a few knives that got damaged in a flood. But if you're wondering why that one's so rusty and that one's so rusty, yeah, it's because these have been salvaged off the bottom of the ocean, basically. That sheath that you're looking at here, this is for a cold steel. I picked it up at a gun show for 10 bucks from a friend of mine that was a dealer in knives. And he saw that I had made this, and then he showed me that to me, and it fit that so well, he sold it to me for 10 bucks. And it was a spare sheath for a cold steel copy of a Randall number 1. Anyway, this file knife is a bigger, it's the full-size Mill Bastard file that Nicholson sold at Lowe's back in the day. That's where I got that. And I put a cross guard on it because that's what I was into back then. This was extremely hard to make. That is mild steel. For those going, you made a cross guard in mild steel? I was young and stupid. I was really, really stupid, but it's awesome now. This is one of my favorite knives still. It's kind of a fighting utility knife. I made it to be kind of like a K-bar. I carried this knife for a long time to a lot of places. Besides being in the flood, it got used a lot. This thing, someone asked me to make them a fighting knife, or what my idea of a fighting knife would be, and I made this to show them how far apart we were on the definition of a fighting knife. This thing is like a stiletto. It's single-edged, but it's like triangular, and it's convex. This is a very, very bad thing to get stabbed with. And has a big handle. It's a long knife. When you throw this, it sticks like a fucking spear. Like, it has weight to it. This is the thing a lot of people don't figure in a knife that you're going to fight with, is that you want some weight and you want it to be balanced in a certain way and yada, yada, yada. And like, this is what I would want in a fighting knife. This is just something to fucking stab someone to death with. Now, again, those I made in my younger days. I was 12, I think, when I made this one. And I think I was like 13 when I made that one. And I was maybe 14 or 15 when I made that one. These are from my last run at making knives. This one was the first thing I made with a real handle bolted through like that. This thing is technically a real handle, I guess, but that's a cow bone, and it's nickel silver, and it's all just epoxied all together. Like, it's not even held on really at all, but it really doesn't need to be because of how good the epoxies are now. If this was ye olde times, I would have made that a little longer and peened it over, and it would have held it all together. but I like my epoxy. This thing, though, I wanted to make Tontos. G-Webs has a little tiny Tonto. That's the first Tonto I made. It's very much in the realm of this shit. It's super small. This, I made just fooling around. I made it to be cord wrapped and then decided last minute to throw a real handle on it. It's really weird. That's one of those, like, it's a freak show special. These two, on the other hand, this one is made in the style of this man, Matt Freeman. You can Google him, find his knives and whatever. He and I used to PM back and forth a lot. A shit ton. I used to do this with a lot of people, but the effect that he had on my knife making is that I can just make this. Like, this looks like he made it. But because I, like, learned all the little tricks and intricacies of how I do what I do while talking to him, and figured out basically how to do each and everything that it takes to replicate his shit, I could just do that if I wanted to. And I choose not to. Like, this is the thing, is like, this isn't me. The main reason I choose not to make more of this shit is that this is like 2 days of my life that I will never get back. I made this in a fucking rage. And my hands were shaking for a long time after doing these grinds. It takes a lot to do these by hand without a jig or guide. You know, that's the other thing, is you guys see this is like, I did this by hand. It's something. But this was Matt Freeman's idea of a fighting knife kind of thing, kind of utility. He liked Tontos. I'm not really a Tonto fan. I wanted to figure out how to make one because I thought it was impressive. And it is impressive. Of all of these two are my fighting knives. You might notice that they're really small. I don't really intend to ever use them. They're kind of like backups to backups. And I think of most knife fights as either we know we're going into a knife fight, or we're just going to go stab somebody. And these are kind of just things to just go stab somebody. Knife fighting, quote unquote, is not, you know, some glamorous thing or whatever. It's this thing. Okay? It's mean up close and over in 5 seconds, because they never see the knife coming. Like, if you're planning on doing anything other than that, I think you're an idiot. Okay? If you're gonna be like in a knife fight like this, my tip to you would be to bring a sword. I have a cold steel Gladius machete that I've been playing with. I had a sword I've made. Fine Ape has it. There's pictures of it on Instagram and shit. Next time he is in Tulsa, I'll have to have him bring that so I can at least do a video on that. Or maybe he can film one. I don't know. It's cool to see some of those. This is my current idea of what I would make for a knife. Talk about it. This is 5160, but I would actually do 1095. I was playing around with 5160 on this thing, but this wrapping is paracord underneath with hollowed out paracord over it, done in the Japanese style. This, I think I'm not going to do that anymore. But half of the reason that, like, I'm where I'm at with knife making is that I've made this shit. I know I don't want to make that shit. I like this shit, you know, and this thing. And I'm gonna do stuff more like this because that's what I like to make. And this cord is held on with J-Flex Marine epoxy. It's all soaked in, and if you're gonna do that, I've seen a couple people like copying, or not copying, but like taking my idea and running with it. If you want the finish to look good on this, here's the tip. You need to put it on with your bare hands, soak it all in with your bare hands, and then set it somewhere away from any paper towels at all to dry. And like use your hands to kind of like smush in the epoxy and kind of rub it off. And you could do this with rubber gloves, but the key here is don't use a rag, don't use a paper towel, and you don't just let the epoxy pool up on there. You need to work it in and kind of wipe it off. You see how little of the epoxy's left on here? It's because I was handling it the whole time it was drying. And like if you do that with rubber gloves, you're gonna have little bits of gloves stuck to it eventually. But if you do it with bare hands, you don't have to worry about that. It makes it look way better than if you just let the epoxy goop up or whatever. As far as the rest of the blade though, like I like having a choil like thing up front here. It doesn't really work that well with the cord wrapping. We'll see. I don't know. I'm kind of up in the air on some of that. But the edge on this is convex, which you'll be able to see better on this thing. I like doing grinds like this where it is just a constant convex grind that gets smaller at the back and there's a super sharp edge at the front. It goes through things really well. It's hard to do. The only way to do it is by hand. And that's kind of my thing with a lot of this. And this thing is the way I do bigger blades. You hammer them out to shape and then you roughly grind them in this pattern. Because if you do everything like this, it's going to cost a lot. Like I could do a sword like this, but it would be a lot of money. This, on the other hand, like I think has a cool look to it. It's pretty much indestructible. And like this is a combat knife. You know, yeah, I kind of like that it has an orc sword look to it, you know? It looks like something Sauron would equip fucking orcs with. I like that. And like that's anything that's brute to forge, which is this shit. This is, in case you're wondering where that came from, I started watching Jason Knight and all of his shit was done that way. And I did Malverde. You can look that up. Just search Malverde on YouTube in the videos, or Malverde knife, and you'll see one of my favorite knives I made. I think Trucker X85 has that one. And I wish I had that knife. I shouldn't have sold that one. That was probably the best knife I ever made. I could make another, but it would be a pain in the ass. And like this is kind of where I'm at with knife making, is that like I've learned the skills that I need to do what I want to do. And now the rest is figuring out how best to do my tooling in the end of the world. Well, I hope this helped somebody with knives. I think this is a cool bunch of knives. It's not very many people who will have a talk on knife fighting who have literally a pile of fighting knives that they have made. Of these, I think my favorite is still this one. Like, if you really need to stab somebody, that's what I would stab them with. See you guys later.